Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Beyond the Stigma, Barriers and Breakthroughs in Black Mental Health. We're excited to have you here. Before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items to ensure a smooth experience. Please note that this presentation will run approximately 1 hour, inclusive of Q&A time. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available in the lobby tomorrow. The recording will also be available on our YouTube channel. I encourage you to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. We will address as many as possible during the Q&A session. A survey will be emailed out shortly after the event ends. Please take a few moments to complete it. We have a QR code available on the slides if you wish to partake in CPAR's research program. You will see this slide at the end of the session. You may also indicate your participation on this post-event survey. Finally, closed captioning is available to you. Be sure to select the CC button on the bottom of your screen to access closed captioning in real time. Thank you, and the webinar will begin shortly.
Greetings and welcome to each of you. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dr. Jonathan Cox, and I am the Vice President for the Center for Policy Analysis and Research here at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. Now, it's my honor to welcome you all to the second and final session of our 2025 Policy for the People virtual health webinar, Beyond the Stigma, Barriers and Breakthroughs in Black Mental Health. Now, today's webinar is part of our Policy for the People series. It's a series that CPAR puts on that sheds lights on issues that are of vital importance to Black communities by bridging policy, research, and the lived experiences of those in our communities. Now, through this series, as with all of CBCF's programming, we aim to bring together subject matter experts, advocates, and policymakers to help foster meaningful change and provide actionable solutions to the problems that continue to impact Black people. Now, if you attended the first session, you heard our president and CEO, Nicole Austin Hillary, talk about the timeliness and necessity of conversations around Black mental health, right? The barriers that exist for Black people in getting access to quality, affordable mental health care, they're very real and they're ongoing. Now, these can be things like systemic issues, which result in shortage of culturally competent providers, and that's something that we discussed in that first session. Could also be underfunding for services, as well as negative stigmas that are associated with mental health care. Now, as the title of today's program indicates, we aim to move beyond the stigma and barriers to highlight how we can move forward to provide Black people with necessary services and shift our thinking around how we provide care, so that we take care of ourselves and continue to push for the systemic changes that impact more than just Black people. And during this final session, you'll hear from experts who can speak to the complex relationship between social media and mental health for Black people, focusing on the role that social media plays in mental health advocacy within Black communities, how we can use social and digital media as strategies for resistance and joy, as well as the ways in which shifting policy can help to create a healthier future in digital spaces. Thank you once again for your attendance. I hope that you all are primed to learn and to engage. The CBCF is honored to have you join us as allies and stakeholders in the ongoing fight for Black uplift. So enjoy the discussion, and I will see each of you at the end of the program.
It is my pleasure to introduce our session moderator, Dr. Rihanna Elise Anderson. Dr. Anderson is a licensed clinical psychologist and associate professor at Columbia University's School of Social Work. She earned her PhD in clinical and community psychology from the University of Virginia, completed her residency at Yale University School of Medicine, and did a fellowship in applied psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. Her work focuses on healing in Black families through clinical services, public engagement in teaching, and policy. Dr. Anderson uses mixed methods to study racial discrimination and socialization in Black families, with a particular focus on reducing racial stress and improving the psychosocial well-being of Black youth through family-based interventions. She's the developer and director of the Embrace Intervention, Engaging, Managing, and Bonding Through Race, and the CEO and founder of Race Space, Inc. Her commitment to translating research into accessible formats has reached a wide range of audiences through blogs, videos, and literary work. Dr. Anderson has also served as the co-host of our Mental Health Minute, a multimedia organization geared toward reducing stigma in the Black community. We're honored to have her guide today's conversation. Please welcome Dr. Rihanna Elise Anderson.
Thank you so much, Dr. Perlman. And hello, everyone. I'm seeing so many amazing spaces, faces, and places in the chat. Just got to shout out the Midwest real quick. I see we are out here. So I'm really excited to jump into dialogue with our three amazing panelists today. So let's jump right into it. I'd like to first welcome our panelist, Dr. David Stamps, who is an assistant professor at Bentley University. His research aims to understand the psychological and behavioral effects of identity-focused interpersonal interactions and individuals' exposure to and engagement with media. Inherent in this work is a recognition that issues of class, gender, race, ability, geographic location, and sexuality meaningfully impact these relationships. Welcome, David. Next, we have Dr. Judith Joseph, a clinical assistant professor in child and adolescent psychiatry at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine. For her social media advocacy, she has been recognized by the U.S. Senate, NAACP, and Very Well Mind, and y'all, Auntie Oprah, okay? Dr. Joseph's High Functioning, Overcome Your Hidden Depression and Reclaim Your Joy was just released this month and will help us understand the science of our happiness. Welcome, Judith. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Shonda Reynolds, a licensed clinical psychologist and content creator. She's the founder and leader of the nonprofit Minds of the Culture and is the reigning Miss Black District of Columbia, USA 2024. I mean, come on. She uses her platform to raise awareness about mental health among Black teenagers and young adults, especially through her podcast, Paging Dr. Shonda, and on stages like Essence Fest. Welcome, Shonda. All right, y'all, let's jump into it. So I want to open it up to all panelists first. Since most people are pretty familiar with social media, let's start with the big question. Social media has clearly been a double-edged sword for Black communities. It connects us on the one hand, but also exposes us to trauma. What do you all think about this dichotomy, and how do we leverage the positives while protecting our mental health? And maybe let's go in order. So maybe Dr. Stamps, can you kick it off first?
Sure. Happy to. Thank you for having me. And you hit the nail on the head. It is this double-edged sword that we have to figure out how to navigate. And a lot of my research looks at digital literacy, and you're going to hear me probably talk a great deal about that because it's this rich tool. And since COVID-19, we've realized that social media and by extension, digital media is rich and real and can be powerful when used appropriately. But that's the issue. Our how we use this tool requires a sense of skill and knowledge and practice. And that speaks to our digital literacy. So you can create and you can thoughtfully engage and you can build communities and you can get access to mental health services if you know how to use those tools appropriately. And so I think our digital literacy skills and really focusing on that within our vulnerable community is going to be a way to make sure that we can use this tool to its full advantage so people are positioned to thrive.
I totally agree with that. The double-edged sword. Social media can be used for good, and it can also, like anything, be used, and in ways that are not helpful for us. I teach doctors at NYU how to use social media to educate the public because, frankly, like most people are getting their information online. They're not getting it from the traditional resources. They want to be able to share the information. It creates community. So there are positives and negatives. And with my clients and with my community, I found it helpful to use something I call the reset method. So the R in reset is realize whether or not it's impacting you in positive or negative ways. Is it hurting your sleep? Is it hurting your mood? Is it, get in the way of your self-confidence because you're comparing yourself to others? How is it impacting your life, and make a list of that. And then the E in reset is educate yourself. There's a lot of new data coming out about how it could potentially not just harm mental health for children, but also for adults. So educate yourself about the recent research so that you know and you're informed so you make better decisions. The S in reset is strategy. How are you going to address this? Are you going to limit, the amount of time you're on it during certain points of the day? Are you going to limit your time as a family on it? Are you going to have these rules that, no phone at the dinner table? What is your strategy? The next E in reset is expectation. So like, what are you hoping to get out of this? Are you hoping to feel more connected, get better sleep, feel better in terms of your mood? be more productive, have a clear expectation. And then the final T in reset is thoughtfulness. So when you look back at the process, was it too rigid? Was it too relaxed? What are areas where you need to revamp? So having this really accessible tool can help you to set things up in your life where you feel as if you have more agency and control when you're using socials.
Yes, Ashe to all these amazing responses. Just to add on to that, I would say that, social media can definitely be the bruise and the balm. And I think that a lot of us experienced that during the pandemic, where we felt the bruise, where we were constantly checked into things happening in the world, racial trauma, things happening right before our eyes, and also the balm because we also were able to come together as a community while we weren't able to physically come together. But some of us found community in the ways in which we were engaging on social media platforms. And I think the perfect example of that is Black Twitter, right? Black TikTok, right? Like we find, I like to call it, that's our digital HBCU, like where we can connect with one another and experience, say our colloquialisms that only we get, right? To be able to experience Blackness and excellence and what that looks like for us in the digital space. And that is healing in itself. But in terms where the bruise might come in is, again, constantly exposing ourselves to trauma, constantly exposing ourselves to all these executive orders happening that can be weighing on our mental health, right? And so as the previous panelists had spoken about, it's important to understand that, yeah, it can be a healing space for a lot of us. And it can also give us language that we haven't had before and how to communicate with others pertaining to our mental health. In addition to that, recognizing that, yeah, I need to check out or to log out for a few days. I need to log out for an hour or so. How can we implement that into our day to day? So if you want to be on social media every day, that's fine. But also, is there a particular time of day where you're like, okay, this time I'm going to use to meditate. I'm going to actually go outside and disengage from social media. That is how we create that healthy balance. And also, as previously stated, continue to educate ourselves on the negative aspects of social media and what that looks like regarding our mental health, self-awareness, anxiety and depression, which tends to spike when we're on social media a lot more, right? It's highly correlated with excessive social media use. So being aware of all those things is important.
Okay, what we're not going to do is drop amazing tools within the first 5 minutes, okay? Because we already have an entire acronym. We've got reset is being dropped in the chat right now. We've got bruise and balm, and I know Dr. Stantz is going to give us something real good soon. So I'm up here collecting. I hope you all are too. I want to stay in this area, and let me just say, I know for so many of us, it's important to know the research and to move to action, to move to joy, to strategy. So we're not going to dwell in this space long, but I do want to tap in with Dr. Joseph real quick because we've been talking about elements of harm, elements of trauma, and picking up on something Dr. Shonda really just said. So during the pandemic, during the last few years, these exposures to viral videos and violence is definitely something that most of us have encountered. And I would like to know, and I start with you again, Dr. Joseph, what does the research say about the impact of this type of content on Black mental health, especially for our young people?
Yeah, I'm so glad you talked about the research because in my lab, I do a lot of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder research. And one of the things that people experience with post-traumatic stress or just trauma is, feeling fight or flight, which is a revved up system where you're like restless and on edge because you are exposed to these violent images. So in order to have a trauma response, you don't necessarily have to go through the trauma yourself. You can witness it. And so if you're seeing images online, you're on a deeper level, your brain is taking that in. And that's why it's so important to protect your brain and limit your brain. It's really important to be informed, but you don't need it 24/7. And, years ago, we didn't have access to all this bad news all the time, but we were still able to stay informed, to be active in our communities, and to feel empowered. So and that's the R in reset, right? Realize what you're doing to your brains when you're not protecting your brain. There's also this large center at Stanford called the Zoom Fatigue Center that talks about how like seeing images all the time impacts us. So for example, you're not supposed to see your face all the time. You know, human beings were meant to talk to each other, to get information from the other person to see if they were safe or if you were getting feedback, if they liked you or not. But we're not supposed to see our face next to someone else's face all the time. But we're seeing our face when we do selfies, when we create content. We're just so exposed to our face. And there's something called the autoscopic phenomenon where you actually get mental distress by seeing yourself so much. So imagine young brains. You know, the brain doesn't fully develop technically until around 25. Imagine that young brains are getting this constant exposure to their own face. So it's not just the traumatic images where we see pain and trauma causing us to have fight or flight, but we're also exposing ourselves too much to our own selves. So think about all that. There's so much data coming out every day. Just learn about it, you know, give yourself the gift of knowledge and be informed before you start using anything, especially social media and technology.
Absolutely. And I can remember the moments where I'm looking at one video and then the next day another video comes up and I think that it's the prior day video. Like these are these moments where you're just standing and looking and unable to release yourself. And there are tons of data that can support some of the things that you're saying. So really appreciate that, Dr. Judith. What do we know about what the research is telling us about this phenomenon? What's different, what's unique about it today than our ancestors, that our families could even give us the support to know about? It's a different time. And so really appreciating that. Want to bring in Dr. Shonda and Dr. Stamps here because again, Shonda, you mentioned Twitter, which I say RIP to. Like I don't have that anymore, so I have to get my own grief together. But what are some of the other elements of trauma that we've been exposed to, and what is happening to our mental health as a result of that?
Yeah, so as Dr. Joseph has stated, you know that vicarious trauma is real. We can certainly be traumatized by watching someone else's trauma, whether that is on social media or through television. But also, you know, let's keep in mind this administration got a lot of us stressing, right? So it's literally executive orders every day. Election stress, election fatigue is real, right? And so for a lot of us, that fight or flight response that Dr. Joseph was discussing, that's activated when a lot of us are tuned into the news. When we're watching, what's going to happen with student loans, what's happening with our immigrant brothers and sisters, like all of these things can elicit those really, that traumatic response in us. And if we're not aware that it's happening, we'll just go with it, as opposed to identifying what that fight or flight system, how it's firing off in our system, and how we can actually regulate it, right, through different sensory-based coping skills. So it's important for us to be mindful of that. That's why I think it's important to label these things, such as the Zoom fatigue, the election stress, because when we live in a bubble, sometimes we might feel as though we're the only ones experiencing it. When no, there's names for this, because there's a mass amount of people who are experiencing the same things that you are. So it's so real, but it's important for us to keep in mind how our bodies are reacting to it so that we know how to effectively respond.
If I can I'm just going to piggyback on that real quick. And I know we have a lot of concepts and terms out there. I live in a professor world, so I'm full of them. But just FOMO, just our fear of missing out when we see people kicking it and we feel like we're losing that. And I just want to give something really tangible to folks out there. And I'm going to use my own life as a reflection. And so I live in Boston, and we just got spring weather like 24 hours ago. And I found myself scrolling because I was cleaning the house, and I was like, you know what? Let me go outside. So I got my Zyrtec because it's pollen in the air, and I just went for a walk. So sometimes the looking at ourselves on screen and getting inundated with all of the chaos that's happening with the federal administration, and even just knowing that life is happening and we may feel like we're missing out on it, sometimes we got to get out and do. As much as I love connecting with folks on Zoom and on Microsoft Teams, as much as I love knowing what's happening across the globe and what's the new lexicon, sometimes I just need to get outside. Sometimes we just need to get outside for our mental well-being, for our physical health, getting those steps in. And so I love the conversation that we're having about the ways in which trauma can produce itself and how we can be cognizant of it. But I really want to encourage folks too that there are things that you can do right now. So you get news that's sitting heavy on your heart, go outside, get some fresh air, go for a walk, and allow yourself to breathe and take that in. And I can tell you just from firsthand knowledge, it was a game changer. That and my Zyrtec. It's just a matter of understanding the world is going to take place. Things are going to happen. People are going to kick it and post their selfies. But you also have agency. Understand that you can prioritize your physical and mental well-being. And some tools, like our ancestors, just going outside. Until the street lights come on, you can run those streets and get exercise, get fresh air, and reset. Look at me. Look at me I'm using my acronyms.
Okay, listen, Dr. Stamps has given you a prescription. Be outside, go outside, get outside, like be outside. So appreciate that. I will take that prescription up very soon with my Zyrtec. Yes, touch and agree on that. I really, really want to stay in this area of joy. So even what I love about us as a people, I asked this really tough question about the challenges and everybody brought it back to joy. So while we're there, let's stay in it, right? So we've highlighted the challenges that come from um, as beautiful Dr. Shonda said, the bruises, right? So let's get to the balm. What are some of these digital resistance tools? What are some of the joys that have come out of using social media? How have Black communities been able not just to survive, but to build that joy, the connection, the collective healing while online? So again, we know that we can go outside, but while we're online, what are some of the things that you've seen? And are there any relevant examples? Dr. Shonda, do you mind if we start with you on that?
Absolutely. I will say some of my favorite things to watch lately have been the 90s trends, the 90s Black sitcoms trends, because it really just brings me back to my childhood and just watching TV and just like seeing those amazing funny moments. And elicits that inner child in me. In addition to that, I love the trend of seeing Black men frolic. Right? We don't see that often. So, Black men encouraging other Black men to run outside with their shoes off, because allowing your feet to touch the ground in itself is, that's a whole healing method, right? So just frolicking outside, enjoying themselves without the cares of the world, because essentially joy is resistance. Black joy specifically is healing. And it really is resistance in the ways in which we are programmed by patriarchy, systemic oppression, things of that nature to live our lives as Black people. We don't have to necessarily internalize all of the anxiety and the trauma that we're exposed to on a day-to-day within our communities, or even on social media or through the media in general, right? We have the power to be able to regain control and what that looks like in our lives. I think it was Dr. Naeem Akbar who talks about how we redefine our own healing and what that looks like for us. So if that means to watch some of these trends on social media without engaging in some of the harmful content, I'm all for that.
Love that. Dr. Stamps, Dr. Joseph?
I'll just say and I see it in the chat. I love to get on TikTok and learn me a quick 8-step real quick. Like, and these knees got a couple of years left in them. I might not be posting it yet, but there's just something just freeing about watching Black folks have a good time. Like, let's just be honest. We throw down. When the beat drops, we drop. And I just want to see us have a good time. And so I've enjoyed going into digital spaces and just watching Black folks create, watching Black folks excel. I will admit I do tend to frolic. I haven't posted it yet, but I absolutely am a part of the trend and getting in there. But I also just love to just watch. I love to watch people dance. I do love my clips. Listen now, listen. And so these are these rich, thoughtful spaces where, and I'm also not on X. But that's what Black Twitter was for us. We were having the conversation. We were playing the dozens, and it was a safe space for us. And those spaces do exist. And sometimes it is nice to just kind of put my feet up and just watch people killing choreography. I'm a big fan of Glorilla, and if you got an 8-step, I'm gonna watch it, I'm gonna practice it, I'm gonna bust it out when I'm ready, and I might post it a little later.
I'm a fan too. For me, it's been really like using it as a history lesson. I love to follow accounts where they teach you about the history that's not in the history books. And I think that's so important, like more important today than ever before. And I have an 8-year-old, so I don't let her go on socials, but what we do together every week is we'll look up a new Black history lesson. So I learned about a woman named Belanda Atis, who created the dark foundations for Lupita Nyong'o's Lancome campaign. I wouldn't have known that had I not been intentional and said, we're going to learn Black history, because I don't think you're getting it in school, you know? Learning about scientists, because she wants to be a scientist and a doctor and a dancer, learning about scientists in history who've done amazing things. Like, you know, the scientist, Dr. Percy, who created the hormones that are now used in the blockbuster menopause industry, right? So things like that, where I didn't even learn this in school. So I love to follow creators who are bringing Black joy through celebrating Black achievements, because we're not getting that in the schools the way we should. But social media has given us this access to this history that otherwise would not have been uncovered. So I think you can be creative with it, you know, like dancing accounts, cooking, baking accounts, all of those things are important for joy. But definitely Black history, because now more than ever, we need to celebrate our achievements and also not forget the past, because we see a lot of the past repeating itself. So we don't want to get too comfortable.
Absolutely. So some of the takeaways that I just heard there, Dr. Joseph's little one is going to lead us in some exercises to be the best self that we can be, the most well-rounded uh, person that we can be. We're going to be line dancing. We're going to be watching 227. We're not going to post some of it till we're ready. That's what I'm taking away. So I love hearing such joy with the panelists, but also in the chat. You all are giving us great energy. Keep it going. Keep those recommendations. I see folks got folders. Drop them if you have, you know, the links. Let us know the good stuff that you all are compiling. You know, we're talking about what we have access to, and we all know there are a number of elements online that are going to push what type of access we have and the type of content that we see. So I want to turn a bit to policy. And I know that we're at a real crossroads. We've got some policymakers who are pushing to reduce harmful content and address this bias. And we also have folks moving in the opposite direction. So I just want to open it up to folks and understand what meaningful policy changes could help us to make digital spaces safer and healthier for Black users. I'll say very quickly, in my role as CEO for Raceface Inc., we developed an app because we saw what was happening to young Black children who were searching for things like racial stress and trauma. When they were searching for that, the types of things that they were getting would make it more stressful or traumatic for them, rather than getting some of the solutions they were searching for. And so how can we keep young people like that in mind? What type of policy initiatives would be really helpful to protect those young people and their families? Anyone want to kick us off with that?
I mean, I've done work with an organization called Wait Until 8th, and they go into schools and they help families to do it together, because it's really difficult when there's one kid in your friend group who has a device, and you know everyone's going to want a device. That FOMO is really important. So this organization's nonprofit, and they go in and they teach parents how to do these small communities where you all agree to delay getting smartphones. You can use flip phones, you can use like the older phones to communicate, but to avoid the smartphones until the child is after the 8th grade. And that's really important, because you want your children to be out in the world playing sports. You know, playing a team sport is one of the top predictors of, you know, protecting children from negative mental health outcomes. Having dinner together every night, that's another one. You know, there are these simple things that people can do, and avoiding exposure to technology that could be harmful. These are the simple things that everyone can do, but we don't have the knowledge. Many of us don't even know that these stats exist or these organizations exist. So I would say, you know, as a parent, don't do it alone, because many times you feel as if like, oh, like this is so stressful. And the Surgeon General just said that parental stress is like at an all-time high because of, in addition to, you know, what's happening in the country, but what's happening with our youth. So don't do it alone, do it as a community, because children do listen to other children. They look at what their peers are doing. So they're going to have that FOMO if everyone has a phone and they don't.
Yeah, I love that perspective, Dr. Joseph. If you can drop the name of that organization, that would be great. But in addition to that, putting pressure from a policy perspective, putting pressure on some of these social media platforms to actually inform parents, like some sort of disclaimer that talks about the the risk of allowing children to be on social media, right? Because there are risks. And so just like there's a disclaimer for cigarettes, right? If someone wants to smoke or drink or what have you, there's a disclaimer associated with that. There's not many disclaimers associated when a child signs up to TikTok or Instagram or what have you. So if parents are, provided that information, I'm sure a lot more people would be able to know how to navigate that a bit more. But I do think that more policy has to be put around that so that people can stay informed. Because how can people protect their children from things that they don't know about?
And if I can build on that, I have a 10 and 12-year-old. And so we're not having a social media, digital media conversation yet. But because they are starting to go outside and hang out with their friends, they have phones. So I can track where they are. And so we have a thoughtful conversation. And again, I'm going to go back to this earlier about digital literacy. They're not in social media spaces yet, but we're talking about misinformation versus disinformation and what cyberbullying looks like. I want them to have those concepts and terms so they can start to build some resilience to that. They can start to identify it and be able to comfortably navigate it. And my school district and a lot of parents, and it is about community. Thank you, Dr. Joseph, for mentioning that. So we have the Wait Until 8 program as well, and it's strongly encouraged. And so it is about community, because if my son's best friend has TikTok, we're going to start the TikTok conversation. But if we can come on one accord and decide they have phones where they can text each other so they can meet up for ice cream, and we're going to hang out just there for right now, as a community, we can slowly start to help parent them in a way that keeps them safe. And then in my house, we have conversations about the role of digital media, because both of my kids have laptops. Their school sends them home with laptops. So they're using digital technology. So I need them to understand how to keep themselves safe and to get them the concepts and terms appropriately, so that they have these literacy skills, so that when the time comes, they know how to navigate them. And we're going to try to prolong it, but I want them to have that foundation in place. And I encourage other parents and other folks as well who are mentoring and who are in that role of community to help younger people have those literacy skills so they can safeguard their well-being.
I love where we're going with this. And so I'm going to blend a few things that some folks have been asking in the chat, as well as some questions that we had lined up here. So going along the lens of the policy perspective, we know that not only is policy murky on this right now, but the platforms themselves have been pulling back from this content moderation piece, given the direction of the current administration. So I'm curious, both, what is the role of government? How can we push them to ensure that our young people are okay? But you all have been picking up on the role of families as well. So how can we navigate this duality of ensuring that we're waiting until the 8th grade, or looking at some of this empirical literature that's showing what's happening? What's our role as professionals to be able to help the government move into advocacy spaces, but how can we also help families to ensure that they know what to do? So if there's any extra things that you haven't said about either of those, I'd love to hear.
Well, I mean, I've worked closely with a lot of these apps about parenting and safety, and I could tell you they have them in place, but nobody's like, it's so confusing. When a parent has to go on, it'll take you an hour just to figure out how to do the parental things. And by the time you're just like, I give up, right? And unfortunately, I do think it has to be a grassroots thing. I think it has to be community based, because kids are smart. Like I treat children, adolescents, and adults, and they figure out a way. Kids, like how Jurassic Park life finds a way, kids find a way, right? So we have to be realistic. And I do think, there's so much data on what makes devices addictive, and it's the fact that it's so seamless, right? You can get on and do whatever you want so quickly. It's portable, so you have access to it at all times, and it's immersive, so you feel as if it's real. And our brains were just not developed. We just were not evolved to be this way with technology. So I think we have to do it as a community. And then write our leaders to support school efforts, because educators are dealing with a lot. But the more that we can do in terms of partnering with these organizations to support schools, to support parents, to support churches, I think that's really, from what I've seen, the way to go. Because I think that when you do leave it up to, okay, as long as the tech firms show that they've done these like things in place, and well, it's not their fault if the parents aren't using it, right? But it's really cumbersome. I've tried to navigate it myself. It's a lot, and children do find a way. So I think we do need to support communities.
And I don't want to be doom and gloom, but we've watched over the last 5 or 6 years the pendulum swing both ways when it comes to content moderation, when it comes to large scale platforms stepping in to make sure that our young people are safe. And so Meta just announced that they're going to be pulling back on content moderation so it becomes a town square of free speech. That means that our children, specifically our Black and brown children, are going to be put in harm's way when it comes to the type of language and videos and things that they're going to have exposure to. When I think of policy, I'm going to kind of build off what Dr. Joseph said on the local level. Our libraries, our school districts, what kind of policies they have in place and how we can best support them. And so I'll give you an example. There's a couple of local bookstores in my community where I do work with the owners. And so we have a conversation of like, can we do a kind of a literacy, exercise, partnering with different schools, partnering with different nonprofits, where you can come in and just have a thoughtful conversation as parents about what kind of policies you want to ask your teachers and your school district and your superintendents to enforce so that we can keep kids safe. And so for me, policy is going to have to be very localized. I can't speak to general populations. I don't know what 12-year-olds are going to need in Miami versus the ones here in Boston with me. But also, those parents may have a very different view. But if we can come together as a community and enact policy on a local level, maybe we can start to find strides there to keep kids safe.
Yeah, and from the community standpoint, I work with children, adolescents as well. So, I'm a firm believer in promoting like a no phone zone. So, if you come into this area, make sure you put your phone in the bin or what have you. And that's just like my little way of making sure that these, the kids that I work with don't feel as dependent on social media, as dependent on their phone, because I do believe that as a society, I don't think we did it intentional, but there are ways that we've been normalizing this, and that's nobody else's fault but our own. Sorry, but that we had to say it, right? The fact that we can literally watch our children go an entire day without looking up at anybody, just in a phone, texting or what have you, and we don't say anything, like we've normalized it. So it really does take those community members of us, parents or what have you, just to call that type of behavior out. Because when I was their age, we didn't have social media, so we know it's possible to go a day or two without it. In addition to that, like from that policy level, I do know organizations and advocacy groups right now who are in the process of litigation for some of these social media programs. So if you feel as though that your child has been impacted negatively by social media and you feel like the policies weren't in your favor, that's a decision that you can make as well. So, not getting too deep into that, but I'm just saying that the option is there for individuals who have access to those advocacy groups. So yeah, just ending my thought.
Yeah.
And can I throw something on there real quick? And this is going to be an unpopular thing, but I want to piggyback. Our children, our communities tend to adopt what they see around us. So if we're on social media, if we're glued to our phones, it becomes socially acceptable. And so if your kids watch you with a physical book reading, they're more likely to adopt those behaviors. So if we want to create the communities and the homes where we see our kids have options and they're not facing screens and arguably being inundated with content that can create harm, we have to take a step back as well. And so it is about community, it is about accountability, but they will mimic what they see. And it's hard to parent when you're expecting an action that you've not exemplified in front of them, because then they have something to kind of question about. And so it is a collective level of engagement. If I want you to take a break from your screen, then I too need to be off my screen so that we can connect. And so in my house, that's a Uno championship. We go hardcore. And so none of us are on our screens. We're all at the table. We get a break. And so everyone, I could use it too. I'm not immune from all of the ramifications that come from just being inundated with content. A break for all of us means that we all can be better positioned to be successful.
Dr. Stamps, that's like 101, right? Like what we see is what we do. And that's a beautiful strategy. I want to pick up on something very quickly. I'm going to ask y'all to be brief in your responses to this, because both Dr. Shonda and Dr. Stamps have given us strategies, the no phone zone, the putting the phone down and being present in the house. So thinking about utilizing the technology though, right? So I agree, we do need that break. We do need that time to reset. But thinking about resources, especially that are community engaged or based or any websites, anything that we can give to families so that, as we're seeing in the chat, that literacy is improved. Do folks have one or two concrete resources that we can drop to folks in the chat about when people are actually engaging in social media? What can they do to be more literate?
Well, that Wait Until Eighth program, I mean, they have a ton of resources. The American Pediatric Association has guidelines based on each age and recommendations. And so that's, usually helpful. And, usually if a child is exhibiting, problems related to, let's say, bullying and so forth, each state has bullying mandates. And so if you feel as if the school isn't doing enough, know your rights. They have these anti-bullying campaigns and procedures in place, but many people aren't aware that they even exist. And so, speaking of the harms of socials, that's one of the things that, unfortunately, as a child psychiatrist, I often see, it being used to target vulnerable children. So, there are available resources. They're just hidden in ways that are not attractive, right? You have to go to these like boring websites, but know that they do exist, and they're there for you to support you.
And I see someone dropped a link in the chat, so definitely appreciate that. Um, and just one more additional site. So I know because I used to work there, Hopkins. So John Hopkins has on their website, as most hospitals do, right? If they have a pediatric unit, they usually have information out there pertaining to the mental health of children, and typically like some sort of like social media guideline is associated with that as well. So.
And I don't want to belabor it. Those are fantastic resources. And I lean heavily on the Wait Until Eight program because, again, I now have middle school kids. And so they lay out explicitly why you want to avoid it. And then if you're going to adopt it, some best practices. And that's what I think that we're talking about. What are best practices for using social and digital media? And the best way to talk to our children to get them on board with that, because they want to go full throttle. And so to tell them, if you see too much, it's going to hurt your self-esteem and your self-perception. These may not land on our children. They might not understand that. But to say, and this is for me, from my son, baby, you got bags under your eyes. Like, I need you to rest for a second. I need for you to like get some sleep for headaches. And so to find real tangible ways to talk to our kids so they can understand why is going to be helpful. And so I think some of those best practices are going to be really useful.
Really appreciate those amazing resources, and thanks to the folks in the chat as well who are providing them. Dr. Shonda, you mentioned the word information, and whenever we hear that, I think we also think of misinformation, and we know right now that it is rampant across social media platforms. So I want to combine a few things that I've heard in our last few conversations about this. Certainly, if we want to go to websites, or if we know that those websites exist, if we want to take that additional effort to find it, we can get to the information. And in a world where there are so many things flying at us fast on these platforms that our hands are glued to, it can be tough to navigate what is accurate, what is inaccurate, what is harmful, what is healthful. And so I'm curious from y'all, how can we ensure that information that's shared is evidence-based to ensure that communities of colors are being educated accurately? Accurately, what are some trusted resources? And I'm going to put someone on blast if they don't say something that we just learned about together yesterday. So I'm going to just kind of look casually while that person is on camera. But are there some trusted resources that we can go to find information that is accurate, that doesn't require us to then go to a whole different website, a whole different place? Who are the people? What are the spaces that we can go to trust this information?
Specifically pertaining to the Black community, I know the Association of Black Psychologists has a journal, right? So their journal, they publish research articles almost, well, not almost, I think every month they have published work that goes out. And usually there is something about related to the digital media or, social media in children or what have you. So I would say definitely stay tapped into that, because that is a resource that can be helpful. But also, I just want to point out, and I know I'm gonna keep it brief, but I don't think it's a coincidence that this information is hard for us to find. In some ways, I do believe that it's like digital redlining in some ways. Like I believe that especially for our kids, they don't want us to have access to this information because our children aren't necessarily deemed as valuable and important. So it does take a lot more work to research it, and the Association of Black Psychologists.
I mean, for me, I love my family loves some true crime stuff, so we're always doing our little investigating. So for me, if I find some information online, I'm gonna go and look up the person on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is one of those very rare platforms where people have to endorse you, you have to list your training. So for health information, look up the person who's providing the information. For facts, if they're claiming to be a journalist or a reporter, look them up. LinkedIn is really good with that. For health information, YouTube is a platform that I work closely with, and Google, and they tend to um, put like a blue label on people who have been licensed and vetted. I know that some other platforms are starting to do that as well. Psychology Today, you have to submit your credentials. There are ways to find out if people are who they say they are. Anybody can create a platform and call themselves a doctor. Anyone could create a platform and call themselves, a thought leader. But there are certain ways that you can make this like, oh, I'm gonna look this person up, make it a little bit playful and like I'm doing my due diligence, because again, you only have one brain, and if you're exposing your brain to misinformation, you may think on a surface level it's not doing anything, but it is seeping in there. So protect your brain and do your research and have fun with it. Be a little sleuth.
Yeah, and I'll be super brief. I agree with everything. I think the more information you can gather, the better. So maybe it may be hard to find someone's credentials, but if you find yourself doing research and 6 or 7 different individuals are suggesting an action, that offers itself a little bit of credibility. So if you find 6 or 7 resources saying maybe taking a break from digital and social media, 2 hours before bedtime, so that the body can relax and the head can relax, that itself can offer some credibility, because when most people come together and we find a consensus, that means things have been tested, things have been agreed upon. And so I'm an academic, and so I believe in sources, I believe in going down a rabbit hole, but if that's not your jam, if you find something that doesn't sit right, then you keep reading from different sources. And if those sources start to become into a consensus, arguably that may lead to credibility. And sometimes people may say things that sound amazing, but doesn't land on your spirit. And then you get to exercise some discernment as well. So you have these tools intrinsically that will help you understand what's best for you and your family and your community as well.
Thank you so much. And I'm happy Dr. Joseph talked about YouTube. We are going to be members of a program that helps to evaluate some of the mental health information that you're hearing this year. And so it is, you can certainly look at who are some of the platforms uplifting as well. What are some of the rigorous training, again, as Dr. Stamps was saying, to ensure that when I'm saying I'm a doctor of this, as Dr. Cox even put in the chat, that A, I really am, but B, I have done the work to support, and that's peer reviewed, it's edited, it's people laying eyes on it before it even hits the internet. And that brings up a lot of what's happening in the chat right now about different populations. We've spoken quite a bit about our young people. We've talked about adults as caregivers, and there's a generation ahead of them that might be quite susceptible, not only to the phone scams that we see happening with our elders right now, but discerning between information that they think should be credible because it's online. They didn't grow up with that ability to discern and to ask questions about this online content, because whatever they saw on a TV screen, they could try to accept that was factual. So what do we do about helping our elders become more literate? How do we support them? Are there unique strategies that we need to attend to for them relative to the other populations we've talked about?
I'll jump in. I'm gonna share a real story. I was working out at the gym and I got a phone call from my cousin who asked, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I am fine." My grandmother was scammed, and she ended up sending someone $400 because she thought something happened to me. She got an email. She couldn't make sense out of it. The email told her not to reach out to me or to call my partner. And it broke my heart. It's kind of over the last few years where I've gotten into digital literacy as part of my research, but also as a part of the talks I give and how we're thoughtfully engaging from a very brass tacks perspective. We have to have these conversations with our elders, with our family members, with our community members. My father passed away last month, and so I am working really closely with my mom in helping her kind of like navigate this new terrain as a widower after 48 years. And so we had a conversation of, because now we're banking online, which she's never done before. And I was like, so I need you to be very like, have conversation. Thank you so much. Have conversations with me about bill pay. Let's talk more about the emails that you're getting. And so, and it breaks my heart that the most vulnerable of us who often didn't grow up with these literacy skills or these digital tools are often preyed upon. We have to have these rich conversations, and we have to have it in such a way that really gets out of the ivory tower and our academic journals. It's really about when someone calls you, or I have to say to my mom, the IRS will never call you. The IRS will never call you. So if someone calls, hang up and call me immediately. And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, and I had to show her online, like if you go to the irs.gov, because we just did taxes, it says there, they're never going to call you. They will snail mail you. And if you log in, you'll get information. And so it was just that literacy skill of if someone calls, Mrs. Stamps, I'm from the IRS. I need your social. Hang up. And she was like, okay. That brass tacks conversation needs to happen with our family members, with our elders, because they are vulnerable and folks are taking advantage of them. And I can speak to real life situations that have happened.
I agree to that. They're vulnerable. And for a large part of my clinical research lab, we did studies in dementia. And Black populations are more at risk for dementia than other populations. And I don't think people know about that. And so one of the things that happens with dementia is that before you actually have full-blown dementia, you have something called mild cognitive impairment. So slowly over time, you start having lapses in your memory and then your judgment and in your decision making. And so I would see a lot of these cases because the dementia patients would come in with their caregivers, and we'd have to literally use concrete visual things in the environment. So like we would do things like putting labels on the phone that say, if this sounds fishy, this is who you call, like literally, because they would just need that visual reminder. And then we'd have to task someone in the home to go through the mail to make sure that they weren't getting scammed, things like that. We'd sometimes have to work with the banks, like, how the banks have like little personal finance groups. I mean, they already have the resources, you're paying for it through the interest fees and all that stuff. So like we had to incorporate people who already exist in the community to help. And then a lot of the times these patients were connected to their churches or organizations. So we'd ask them to help as well, because you can't do it alone, and it's very real that as you get older, you experience loneliness. So if there's a nice person calling you on the phone and chatting you up and they found personal information about you online, then you're going to believe them if you're lonely, So we had to do a lot of education with the community at hand, on like things like mild cognitive impairment, and also B on like real tangible tools that they could use in their homes and to get the support they need, because there's a caregiver burden as well.
Is it okay if I add one thing? I'll keep it under 30 seconds.
Please do.
Okay. So a lot of local churches since the pandemic also have been providing a lot of, courses and things specifically for elderly populations, because a lot of churches were Zoom based during the pandemic. So, if there are questions about that, you guys can research any local churches that have those types of skills.
Thank you so much for those really amazing resources, y'all. We're at our final question, which breaks my heart because what a fantastic time this has been. So I'm going to ask for brief remarks from each panelist to get us to visualizing and manifesting a more positive Black future for our little ones. So if you could imagine a healthier, more affirming digital ecosystem for Black communities in the next few years, what would it look like and what steps can we start taking now? 30 seconds. Let's go. Dr. Shonda, hit it.
Yeah, so I'm just going to have to echo Dr. Linda James Myers, who talks about how liberation is our freedom and also our healing. So, what does that look like for our children? Allowing them to be free, but also giving them the information that they need to successfully thrive in this world.
Ashe, Dr. Joseph.
Technology isn't going anywhere, but two things can be true. You can sit with your child and be curious about what they're looking at. You can learn with them and make it immersive. Make sure you're stimulating all the senses. So just don't be on a screen. Like if you're watching a video about, let's say, music, then, teach them how to listen to music without a screen. If you're watching a video about food, then teach them about the senses and colors. Like there are ways to incorporate the real world into what your child is already experiencing online.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. Dr. Stamps, take it away.
Yeah, I think always seek out magic and joy. I love the hashtag Black Boy Joy, Black Girl Magic. And so I want our generation of change makers to, if they're in these digital spaces, become creators, become, whether you want to be influential in communities, and make joy and magic the cornerstone of who you are. How can you uplift others? How can you pay it forward? How can you reach back? If joy and magic is at the foundation of who we are, it is limitless what we can do, no matter what space we're in, whether you're in a physical space or a digital space. As long as joy is at the cornerstone, sky's the limit.
Oh, I love it. The last thing I'll add, as someone who loves working with young people, this is my favorite move right here, where I put my glasses all the way down and I'm just like, now what is that? Now teach me about that. And giving people the opportunity to teach you and to tell you what it is that they know, so that it's not us just directing our information to them. They're able to exude their joy, their independence, their resilience, their spirit onto us, so that we can learn from them, make it bi-directional, and give them that agency and expression. Y'all, what a joy it's been. I echo everything that's coming in the comments right now. Our panel was absolutely beautiful and liberating. Thank you all so much for your time. And Dr. Cox, we're looking forward to your final words.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon again. I have the distinct honor of closing us out for today. I know that all of you all have learned a lot. I was watching the chat actively. You all were very, very engaged, so thank you so much. Please join me in offering a virtual round of applause to all of our incredible speakers for today. Not only for our first session that happened earlier this morning, but for these speakers we just heard from during this second session. To say that I was schooled in policy issues around Black mental health would be a woeful understatement, right? In fact, I was actually sharing some of the information you all were talking about with my partner. So we have a 3-year-old right now. I have to think about some of these things like as this conversation was happening. So this was really, really great. It was a true honor to hear from you all who were such engaging and thoughtful speakers. I'd also like to extend a very warm thank you, to each of you, the attendees, right? Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today, for being so actively engaged in the chat. Here at the CBCF, it's our hope that you see us as a key source of information around issues that are of utmost importance to the global Black community. Now, our programming, as well as our research, is meant not only to educate people, but also to inform policy, right? And bringing together people like you is really critical to this work and to our mission. Now, I'd also be remiss if I did not extend a thank you to the amazing team at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. We are a small but mighty team, as our CEO loves to say, and events like today's webinar series simply would not be possible without the work of everyone at the foundation. It's such a pleasure to work with each of you, and I find so much joy in this partnership. Now, in closing, I wanted to share a few things with everybody about the CBCF, our work, and some upcoming events. First, please be sure to check out all of the resources, these amazing things that were shared in the event lobby before the session began, as well as in the chat throughout the session. These resources provide a lot of additional insights into Black mental health. We encourage you to peruse them for your own edification, but then also to share them widely with your networks. Second, please be sure to check out CBCF's research and policy work by visiting our website at www.cbcfinc.org. And here you can find resources like our executive order tracker that provides updates and information on many of the executive orders and other presidential actions and their impacts on Black communities, as well as what members of the CBC have been saying. Third, save the date. We have a couple of major programs coming up that I want to let you know about. First is another health-related program that's happening on May 20th. It's our Policy for the People Health Equity Summit. Will be taking place at the Capitol Turnaround in Washington, D.C. This is an in-person summit It focuses on access and affordability to chronic disease management and treatment for Black communities. And you can find information about this for registration on our website. And we'd all also invite you to save the date this September and join us for our annual legislative conference. This will be taking place September 24th through 28th at the Walter E. Washington Convention Center in downtown DC. Save the date, be on the lookout for more information as registration will be opening this summer. Finally, here are just a couple of simple requests. One, we want your feedback. Please scan the QR code to complete a survey about today's event. Your insight and input really helps us to meet the needs that you have for future events. So we really want to make sure we're hearing from you. And as well, you could also sign up to be a participant in the research that we do in CPAR using the QR code that's provided in our rotating slides. Since this session was also about social media, make sure you stay in the know and to go ahead and follow CBCF on X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Thank you all so much once again for your time and for your attention. And on behalf of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, I wish you all a great remainder of your day. Peace.